Previously on Hayward Haunter.
The Wobbly Bridge. It seemed to work for all of about 2 seconds, so I guess that means I'm too fat for the wobbly boardwalk. I have an idea. Okay, so the first step is to rebuild the frame so that it is less warped. You can see the way this is sitting on the ground, there's really quite a bit of warpage to the frame. I'm going to use pocket screws to hide things like the very inauthentic Phillips screw heads that probably weren't very common on piers back in pirate days. It's more important that these boards be precisely the same length than they be the exact length. So I've got nice square cuts on one end, and I'm going to cut them both at the same time so that they come out the same length. For the end caps, I'm doing the same trick. I've got both boards squared up. I'm going to cut them at the same time so they come out the same length. The new frame looks a lot more square, a lot less warped. There's a little bit of twist that I'll have to compensate for carefully when I put it together. When I was lining up my boards and checking to make sure they weren't warped with respect to each other, I made little marks so that I could keep their orientation the same way they were cut, the same way I had checked them out. This rough sawn look that all these boards happen to have will all be on the outside edges, which I think is cool. They give it a nice aged look that we can really make pop when we use a little stain. This is a pocket hole jig. It has guides for drilling pilot holes for your pocket screws. These are all adjustable for various thicknesses. I'm going through the narrow side of a 2x4, which isn't really 2 inches, it's 1.5 inches. There's an arrow here, and there's a measurement guide on each side. So what I need to do is adjust these gray pieces out until the arrow aligns with the 1.5 mark. The jig also comes with a bit and has this collar on it that limits how far into the wood you can go, because this collar will hit up against the ends of the guides. You set the distance to this collar to your workpiece by putting it in the case so that the tip is up there, and you can see this one is already set just to the 1.5 line, which I guess is the same as the 1.25 line. Because I'm not a good woodworker and I need all the help I can get, I bought this crazy clamp. This is the one that's designed to work specifically with these jigs, which have a circular pad that this clamp can spring down onto. Now, this has 2 holes, and you'd think, well, that's the spacing, I should drill my holes. And unfortunately, it's not quite that simple. According to the manual for wider pieces like 2x4s, you'll have to reposition the jig between each hole. You want each one in just 9/16, which is just over 1/2 inch, so I'll have to double check my spacing here, and then we'll drill some pocket holes. It says you slide it in until it touches, back it out, get the drill up to speed, and then we go. A little tight, so we'll release the spring clamp. Reposition the jig so it's flush with the other side, and drill our second hole. So there are our first 2 pocket holes. They're a little rough. Back out a little, get drill up to speed, and off we go. tighten it down all the way. I want to get the other one started and see if I can square it up and hold it tight while I cinch them down. And so there's our new frame, which is less warped than the old one. It's lies flat pretty nicely, at least on the garage floor. So now the real trick is getting the fulcrum bar in there. I've laid the board I'm going to use as the fulcrum on the ground and laid the frame over it as centered as I could, side to side. I made this edge perfectly square with this edge. And then I've marked a line. You can just barely see it in there. That's our fresh cut line, because it's near the end of the board, but it's not exactly the end of the board. And then at the opposite end, I've made another line, and that may not be exactly 90 degrees, but if we cut the board so that both of those lines just barely remain, we should have something that fits in here really nice and tight. Well, that plan to size the inner board worked almost perfectly. You can see I'm just off by it. Maybe an 1/8 of an inch, but probably more like a 1/16. So I'm just gonna sand it until it fits snug right in. About 10 seconds with a sanding block, and this thing fits so nice and tight and snug, it's awesome. So I went ahead and put in some pocket holes, and I'm gonna secure it to the ends with pocket screws. Now, instead of capping the edges with 2x4s like I did in the prototype, I think I'm just going to use some 1x4 with the trim pieces on the top. I'm turning things over, and I'm going to put some trim pieces across this side, which will help support the joints on the fulcrum, because we don't want all the weight all the time on just those 4 pocket screws. So with the trim pieces on the top and bottom, the boards are captive in normal use, but if you turn it upside down, you can still finagle them out, which is actually useful so that I can finish the construction and then go back and age up the boards as I need. And, all these little black things are zip ties that used to hold the board to the straps in the original design. So the idea is that I'm roughing up these edges and cutting out some divots. I'm holding the jigsaw at an angle to the board so that I take out chunks from the visible edge, leaving the bottom edge intact. So I'd seen this trick described before, and it always seemed like it would be really tedious and take a long time, and I don't know if it was worth the effort. And now that I'm trying it for the first time, I'm like, hey, wow, this is actually much quicker than I thought, and seems to get really good results. Wood grain is alternating bits of soft wood and harder wood in the rings, and so when you graze over it with the spinning wire wheel, it takes out some of the softer wood and leaves actually a really good aged texture. Make sure you're wearing eye protection and dust protection, as I am, because this does make a lot of very fine sawdust. Dust mask, eye protection. I don't know if you can see it. Right through here especially, we got some really good grain texture. With this lighting angle, you can see some of the texture and stuff we've managed to put into the boards. It's going to make it a lot more interesting. So this jug of goo is a horrible homemade stain using the Hollywood Haunter formula, which is steel wool that's been soaking in, what do you call it, vinegar, just plain old white distilled vinegar. I've just diluted it with an equal part of water I've got gloves on because I don't know what this does to skin. I've got a chip brush, and I've got a cloth. Wow, that stain is amazing. It is so simple, and like you put it on and it's like, oh, that doesn't do much, and then it darkens up over the next few minutes. I am gonna love it. MVP, minimal viable pier. I wanted to do more to give it a nautical theme, get it up off the ground. But this is usable as is, and I'm running out of time, so I'm going to work on some other priorities for a while. If I have time, I will circle back to do more to this. But it does certainly work. Oh, so fashionable shoes with sides. We'll have to edit that, because that looks stupid.